Hello and welcome everybody to episode 30 of HeroesHype Live. This week we are discussing anything and everything for Cup 7 of the Open Division. Now, Battery, okay, you are unmuted. This week, as everyone knows, we do have Battery as our guest. So Dunk, tell me about yourself and how I totally just stole what I was going to have you do. But...
Hey, Dunk, you want to introduce Battery? Hey guys, this is Battery. Oh, wait, hey.
So how about this? How about this, Dunk? How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I could be better. I could have introduced Battery.
Well, why don't you do that anyway? I just said his name.
So, Battery, I believe, is the team captain, and in my opinion, the face of EID, seeing as he's the only one with EID in his name. So, I believe our fourth seeded team in our top 8, EID, taking third place this week. So, congrats, bud. You make it to the top 8. You guys ready for the Crucible?
Yeah, we're ready. Looking forward to how next week goes. Feeling pretty good.
That's
I have
good.
a past history of not being highly seeded, but still making it to the Crucible, so not too worried.
Seems good. All right. Well, without further ado, I want to hop right into it to EU Cup 7. So, I don't know who just got home.
We have the top side of the semifinals, worst positioning versus E-Punks, which if you had a chance to watch the games, it was a 2-0. Worst positioning actually going 2-0 all the way through the bracket, except for the finals. Looking really strong. I mean, they beat Team Singularity last week, repeated it this week. Unfortunately, I'm not going to actually talk about the finals just yet. And then we had Terra's Razina versus Granite Gaming in the other semifinal. But let's talk about worst positioning versus E-Punks.
So I want to quick talk about, you mentioned that they beat Singularity last week. So we had two members of Singularity, Loranis and Henning, on the show last week, and we talked about this, and if the worst positioning team is like their kryptonite. And they're like, no, we just kind of played like monkeys the entire game, the entire series. And I was actually adminning for that series between them and worst positioning, and Loranis is like, he whispered me, it's like, crap, we're just playing terribly again. So I kind of felt that. I'm like, oh, no.
Yeah, which is a feels bad moment. Team Singularity is one of the few teams that is sponsored within the Open Division. But overall, they do, as they stated last week, they actually maintain the number 1 seed completely uncontested at 575 points. The next highest is at 440. So even though they dropped out early, they knew they didn't need to really push it, because coming to the playoffs, they don't really want to show off anything in the next.
Yeah,
cup.
that's it. I want to show off a lot.
They could kind of just
when the
coast.
patch changes.
Yeah,
that is true. The patch is changing.
Same for us. For us.
They did take out E-Punks 2-0, and honestly, the first game was pretty close. I think it was on Shrines. I might be thinking of the Granite Gaming series with them, but because all the games kind of meld together at this point. But they did play them pretty close in game 2, actually. But game 1, worst positioning held a 2-level lead for most of the game, whereas in game 2, E-Punks were playing them pretty consistently up until. No, I'm thinking the finals again. It was up until about 13, and then worst positioning just started winning team fight after team fight after team fight, and just kind of steamrolled the game from there. So I think going into the playoffs, worst positioning looks pretty solid. I think they ended up, if I can find it, they ended up being 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7th. So they did move up a spot, and they overtook Valhalla because of that win. But as we'll get into it, they didn't look as good in the finals, I guess. Or at least the other team looked better. So going to the other semifinal, we had Terra's Razina, the champions of 2 cups this season, going up against Granite Gaming. Now, Loranis had talked about how Granite looked to be the second best team in Open, behind them.
Sorry, Henning said they were in the top 3.
My bad.
He said it's worst positioning, Granite Gaming, and their team Singularity is the top 3.
Okay. And Granite did not disappoint. Last week, unfortunately, they had a personal issue that they had to forfeit. So going into this week, I was really looking forward to seeing how they would play, and they definitely delivered. They easily handled Terraz and moved on to the final to play worst positioning. Now, I want to talk about the final a little bit. Game 1, worst positioning kind of controlled the game, controlled the flow, had a good level lead throughout the entire game. Going to Game 2, it was basically the opposite. Granite Gaming had controlled it the entire time. Was never really worried about them losing it. Like, Raidboss was doing work his garage. Like his control of his zoning for his team, his control of the team fight was really good. His taunts were always perfect. So going into Game 3, I was really excited to see just how well matched these teams are, and they proved me right, because at level 16 there weren't any forts gone yet. It wasn't until I think like 17, 18 that the first fort went down. And I think it was on that push, actually. Maybe it was 2 Dragon Knights after that, or 1 Dragon Knight after that, that Granite Gaming just pushed bottom, got the keep. No, they didn't even have a Dragon Knight. They got the Dragon Knight, got the keep, and then they got both Siege Camps bottom and the Knights, and just pushed to the end, which was actually pretty crazy. If you can only watch one game of the entire cup, watch Game 3 of Granite Gaming versus Worst Positioning, and just watch how well they dance around the enemy core, and they basically win a bunch of little skirmishes around the core while the camps are killing it. So I think Granite really showcased that they are actually one of the top teams in EU, and I'm looking forward to seeing how they do in the playoffs.
Yeah, and a great way to end their season, taking the win. Feel good moment, especially after last week when they kind of had to just say, "Oh, sorry guys, like family emergency, can't play this game," and which is awesome because in the semifinals, the team they beat was the team they had to forfeit to last week. So
Yep.
Good on them coming in it, getting the number 1 spot for that week. EU standings, we talked about it already a little bit. We have Team Singularity in the number 1 spot, 3 cups won. Terra's Rodzina, number 2 spot, won 2 weeks in a row. Manticore never getting a win, but 2 second place finishes and then a lot of top 4s.
Top 8.
Or top 8, sorry. Yeah. Granite Gaming taking the 4th spot with 1 week 1. Team Go, pretty much top 8 all season, a couple of top 3 finishes.
Mm-hmm.
E-Punks in the 6th slot, doing pretty well, consistently making it to the quarterfinals throughout the cups. Worst positioning, actually not making a single point, taking a single point in the first 3 cups, and then coming back into it to take top 3 and a third, second, and then first in the weeks, and then Valhalla to close us out. Kind of had a little bit of a dip mid-season, but they did manage to come back and maintain an 8th to 3rd spot finish. So,
and they did get knocked out in the round of 8 by Terraz Rosina this week. And they also made a change. I don't remember the name of the player at Tank. It was Danatan that they picked up, and I think that has made them look better. So I think the most interesting matchup will be. Well, I think Manticore is going to be playing E-Punks, and I think E-Punks is going to take that series. I think that'll be the upset, just based off seeding. But as Singularity said last week, Manticore is looking like the weakest of the 8, so I want to see.
Despite having a 3rd place too, place in their 3rd place in points,
because they got second the first 2 weeks, and then they just finished top 8 everything else. So anyway, let's move on to NA. I think that was. Not to say that EU was bad this week, because it was definitely exciting, but there was a lot more storylines, I think, this week for NA.
Oh, yeah.
and the main one is King's Gambit. Now, they came in to week 7 with 100 points. And looking at like everyone's points, they needed at least.
They had to get 2nd place.
They needed, I think it was
tournament.
3rd. Because Snowfrogs and Azua
Oh, 3rd. No,
got
they
knocked
needed.
out.
They're 20 points ahead, and if they went 3rd, they would have gotten.
They would have been like 15
5
points short
ahead.
or something.
If they got 3rd, they'd be 5 points ahead.
Yeah. So they
yeah.
barely got in. And they beat Rouge AO Laval's Dorm Team.
Yep.
Actually, really convincingly, I heard. I didn't see it on. I don't think it was streamed, but the Towers game that they played, King's Gambit won with 36 points left on their core.
Yeah, it was crazy. That game was insane.
So going into the first semifinal, they played XD. The first game, XD.
Well, the first thing they did was they took out trait value.
Yep, they took out trade value. Who had just picked up Stray again.
And had won like 2 cups prior, but they kind of struggled to hold the line. They just kind of got swept away.
Yeah, they. I was talking to Alex the other day, and he just felt so bad because they got knocked out, and they were farming people in Team League to reclaim their honor. Basically, what was happening.
I saw that. Yeah.
So yeah, they took out Trait Value, who was I think they finished first in 1 week.
Week 5,
fifth cup.
And then they beat Rouge, who has been a consistent top 4 finisher at least the past several weeks. And then going into the semifinal, they played XD. XD had pretty good control of the first game, where either that or like King's Gambit played them pretty close, and then just kind of late game, everything kind of fell apart for them. And XD just started taking everything away from them. Hami played a really good Tracer. I think he played it all 3 games, or at least 2 of them.
They don't really like giving away Tracer, but they weren't really pairing Tracer with anybody. It was just kind of like Hami by himself in a lot of the games.
I think
and King's Gambit was just, if you look at all the drafts, it looks like everybody was playing their own game. It's just that King's Gambit was not really interrupted draft wise. Yeah. Whereas XD was kind of scrambling to get their parts.
Yeah.
I don't
think Hami ever had Malfurion with him. I think he had Stukov or
yeah.
Rhaegar with him every time. So that was a little interesting.
It's hard to be as oppressive.
Yeah, Toby was they were taking away Malfurion when they could, or banned it.
Yeah, and King's Gambit plays Greymane really well.
Mm-hmm. Kevin was doing well.
And Greymane's the counter to Tracer. When you don't have the Malfurion behind Tracer, it can be a lot easier to handle Tracer. Mm-hmm. So it kind of made it really difficult for Hami in a lot of those games.
Yeah, both Tracer and Genji, I think Greymane does really well into.
Yeah, I think that King's Gambit's really good at fighting.
Yeah,
and XD didn't try to get a macro advantage in like any of the games, and it just kind of hurt him. Because King's Gambit, they usually win by just stacking up a kill count, like at an objective.
They did.
Yeah, especially when you look at these compositions, man, dude. Like,
if you look at
everything about it says, we want to fight."
Yep.
Yeah.
My favorite thing, and I know Kevin really likes to do this, is play Jaina. And in game 2 on Towers, XD went triple tank. They went Garrosh, Blaze, and Dahaka.
Yep.
And I see the Abathur and I see the Genji. I'm like, okay, so XD's drafting this to counter the Genji. And then post second ban, I'm like, okay, well, Kevin's going to break out the Jaina because that's going to destroy every single front line that they have. And that's exactly what happened. Like,
that's going to make it she's got a target-rich environment to like throw Qs out forever.
Kevin just like brought them down to 50% or lower, and then Droplets came in and just sweeped everyone else under the rug. Like,
yeah, if you watch those fights, they like would lose Genji like in the first 5 seconds to nothing, and then over the course of the next 30 seconds, because XD had no way to secure kills, they would just kind of work them over and then finish them off later.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's super not a good place to be.
Abathur
it's really painful when you realize halfway through a game that your comp doesn't have a way to kill people, and you're like, oh man, how do we do this? Mm-hmm. That's kind of how those games look.
Yeah, pretty much. If you don't have pulse bomb up, like your triple tank doesn't do anything to that composition, and then you have to worry about Genji has protect, double ice block. It's a Muradin, and then an Abathur throwing in those extra shields. Okay.
Well, Muradin with a hat into triple tank is like a dream for Muradin, especially when your opponents have no way to deal damage to Muradin, because late game he gets the hat, gets the heals from his W, gets the heals from the hat W, is a force to be reckoned with, like with his 7 tier, and he just kind of, there was like a fight at the end where Muradin basically, it was like Muradin, Malfurion, Abathur, and there were 4 people enemy team, but it didn't matter because Hami was dead, and he just kind of like, well, just gonna keep fighting until you're all dead, because I'm certainly not going to.
Yeah, you just can't kill me. I'm just gonna sit here.
They picked a composition that killed like low mobility backline and they got super punished because they needed to kill the front line.
Yep.
They had to kill Murden in order to win those fights because they're trying to get to Jaina, and Murden slows them down. Jaina slows them down. Genji's not going to be a target unless he gives himself up. So it became pretty painful to watch. I mean, if Trace gets his bomb on Murden, like those tanks aren't going to finish off that kill.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Nesper, for the host. I appreciate it. Hope you just stream
What a good guy. What a good guy. EID Nesper coming in.
Yeah. So then going into game 3, I think it was on BOE, if I remember correctly.
Sky Temple.
Sky Temple. And they're pimping on Twitter. I don't know, Sailor. Maybe.
Is that the game that Abathur? I'm just going to guess the comp. Abathur, Tracer, Abathur,
No, Abathur, no
Tracer.
Tracer.
Hami was
That
on.
was a different set. It was a different
Hami
set.
was on Malthael on Sky Temple.
Yeah.
And then Kevin was on Greymane. I think Droplets was on Genji again. Diesel.
So we had Toby on Malfurion, Kevin on the Greymane, Diesel on Garrosh, Droplets on Genji, and then Zergling on Blaze.
Okay. Honestly, I think King's Gambit just straight outplayed them that game. Like,
Yeah,
there was
all that
nothing
high
there.
mobility. Like, yeah, you have like the Medivh getting around on the portals and stuff, but like your damage is Malthael and Hanzo. Like, I just feel like Genji and Greymane just do so much burst damage that when you have like these kind of sustained type DPSs, it's what are you really gonna do in these fights, especially when Bunker comes into play off of Blaze.
Yeah. And
I don't
like,
know.
Yeah. Genji really shuts down Medivh too.
yeah.
Like,
I
Medivh
remember
doesn't really have a fun time against Genji.
I remember one point in particular where Diesel came in with Zergling, and they 1v2'd or they 2v1'd Medivh, and through the portal, like they kept him from getting in the portal. They killed him before he could go in, and through the shield, which was I didn't think that two tanks could do that much damage, but obviously they were able to do it. So anyway, I want to move on to the next one, where EID was playing, so Battery can talk about those games. Also,
Do we have to?
I mean, if you really don't want to,
That's fine.
I do want to say one thing. All 3 games on Tuesday went all 3 games, so
Yep.
it was a long
they
night
did.
for everyone.
Not all of them.
Well, the third, fourth place didn't, I guess. But
No.
I remember coming home and being like, all right, I'm gonna watch the games a little bit. Didn't end up doing that, and then I was like, okay, it's like 9:00. Okay, I should watch the finals right now. And I was like, wait a second, Arya and EID were in the semis. Why are they in the finals now? And I looked at the bracket. I'm like, oh, we're just in the semis still. It's 9:00.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Took a long time.
So EID, you guys took Dragonshire, and then
They picked Dragonshire. We
They
had first
picked
pick.
Dragonshire.
Oh yeah, we won.
Well, you won that game.
That game kind of just everything we went for, we got,
Mhm.
and it just kind of all of our plans went to fruition, and everything just came together, and we just beat them. It was it's sort of a snowball because they didn't really have a whole lot of answers. They didn't really hurt us that much. Maybe just like a pick or two every once in a while, but our kills were turning into buildings, and theirs weren't.
Mhm.
And it kind of just worked out for us in the long run. Plus, we had Malthael against their comp, and we could solo people on the other side of the map, whereas they needed to commit more resources. So
Mhm.
we were able to just kind of lead them around.
And I think Priz was playing a lot of Junkrat this tournament, and I think he played
Yeah.
it at least 2 of the 3 games.
He played it on Tomb and Dragon.
Obviously, it worked better on Tomb than it did on Dragonshire, but I think that's
Oh,
more
yeah.
like you guys just played better that game. Where
I don't know.
compared to
Junkrat's really defensive on Dragonshire.
Mhm.
You kind of makes it so that you are like, oh, you got ogres and we didn't. I'll just bomb these ogres into our wall that you can't even push. Or you've got a huge wave, I'll bomb that. His concussion mine really shuts down sieges, and he can do that all over the map. So Junkrat is really good in the early game at defending your own buildings, and then he's really good in the late game because he's got just a ton of damage and high mobility.
One thing that I noticed from Priz throughout that series and the finals as well is that he struggled to get stacks on his Q, like his level 4 quest. He was always low going into the late game, like sub 100, which I thought was interesting. Obviously, it didn't end up mattering as much because they won everything, but just it's interesting. Maybe because he was splitting off so much that he wasn't always in the team fight.
Yeah,
so
he
couldn't get
definitely
stacks.
he definitely do a lot of splitting on Junkrat early. If you watch the Tomb game, he was really just like mid top for the first 6 minutes. And plus, we weren't really like the Dragonshire game. You take what you can get on Junkrat. It's not really a good map to like get a whole lot of stacks. It really depends on what characters you're playing against and what you're going to be stacking. You really wait for the later game to get a lot more stacks on Junkrat. Unless you're playing like a Cursed Hollow match that's going to last a long time, or some kind of point defense or cap map where you can get a lot more like constant fighting.
Yeah, you guys had Malthael, Joanna, and like typically you're off on your own, and then he's trying to hit like a Tracer or a Tychus. It's like, okay, those guys just keep moving around. They don't stand still. They don't have to stop moving to do their damage. So,
yeah. So, Battery, tell me about you go out one game in Dragonshire, and then you drop this Sky Temple game. What is your mindset going into a game 3 that could potentially take you out?
What, like that we might lose?
Yeah, well, like,
I mean,
you had secured your spot in the playoffs, so like that's safe. But I think you're.
Well, we know
fighting for
that
seeding
like whether
at this
if we
point.
win this or not, it's not gonna like change anything. We're still gonna have to beat the same number of teams
Yeah.
on the playoffs, and it's not like all or nothing. We're not like freaking out or losing our shit or anything. So
Yeah.
we
Well,
the Sky Temple game, we were feeling kind of good about it because we felt like we had really adapted, and they had a good lead at the beginning that kind of rolled, and we started bringing it back, but we kind of desperately tried that in the game, and it ended up burning us pretty bad. So going into the third game, it's like, hey, we pretty handedly won the first game. They kind of got a good macro advantage, and we had sort of low damage in the second game, and then the third game, I think we kind of messed up our draft, and they just kind of their pieces were just good against our pieces, and we couldn't really like grab onto them. And I haven't played against Stitches in forever, and Stitches is always really good when you haven't practiced against him. So they're just kind of a perfect storm against us. And even that game, I think that even though we're getting kind of beat earlier on, there were still openings for us to win later. We just kept making mistakes.
So going from that series, we'll move on to the finals. So King's Gambit is playing against Arya Please, formerly SMV. If you don't know, I'm going to quick bring up the standings. Dunk, did you get a chance to watch those games?
Yeah, no, I did. And honestly, like, we've seen some good stuff out of King's Gambit over the weeks. I mean, I don't feel like they've been doing so well because of their bracket each week. I feel like a lot of times they come up against like either XD or SMV early on in the bracket, and it's like, well, we're going to drop out in the 16. Try again next week. But this week, they came out swinging. Obviously, they took out Laval, and then they took out XD. I mean, they're our 8th seed team, so that's pretty awesome, seeing the bottom of the 7th seed team, sorry.
Yeah.
Bottom of the bracket, not even guaranteed in the 8, making their way last minute to take that position. So
so this series, I really want to talk about game 3 specifically, because I think of the 3 games, that was the most impactful, obviously because it decided the series, but like the decisions that were made from King's Gambit specifically, I think cost them what happened, like cost them the game basically, because they were winning pretty handily going up until like they picked a fight just before they hit 16. It was 15-14. Blaze was top lane, Zerling was top lane, showing as well, and we see Diesel sitting in a bush and he taunts, and they don't get the kill, and they end up losing a 5v4, and that just gets Arya Please right back in the game. It ties them up in levels, and it kind of just steamrolls from there, because honestly, all the momentum that King's Gambit had is just gone. And I wouldn't say they don't know what to do, because obviously they're good enough players that they know what to do.
Yeah.
But they never get anything back. So I just thought talking about like what exactly could they have done better? Because I talked to Dropwoods a little bit today, and he said that there were 2 calls going on to like wait for 16, and then someone called the fight, and obviously in the heat of the moment, you kind of just things happen. But has that ever happened to you, Battery, where there's some miscommunication in your team and 2 calls are going on, and that causes a mess up?
Someone might say like, "Oh, I've got my ult up in 10 seconds," and like some kind of objective activates, and someone on the team kind of in their mind doesn't quite fit the pieces together, so then things get jumped, or people aren't in the right position, or people didn't know that was going to happen, or you forget to communicate something. It happens. High stress environments. It's kind of like it's like walking up to a door and the door says pull on it, but you're in a high stress, high situation environment. You read it and it says pull, and then you push it. Right?
You're defining my life.
It says pull, because it's a high stress environment. It happens.
Yep.
That's how it goes. You know?
I'm like the king of walking into doors. Like, I thought it was a push.
Yeah, and it's just right there. You couldn't have not seen the sign. You know.
Oh, man.
So, I think a lot of the stuff that they did, it's kind of like things that in hindsight, you look at a replay, you don't need a coach to tell you what you did wrong. You're kind of like, oh, I just didn't look at my teammates, or I didn't check the map, or I didn't respect the 16-15. I think a big part about that game was I don't think they quite realized how the situation was going to develop. I think they probably in their heads thought, well, if we're winning the early game, we're probably going to win the mid game, and if we're winning the mid game, we're probably going to win the late game. But Li Ming and Tracer both scale above regular scaling. Like Li Ming's spells deal more damage over time because she scales above the 4%, and Tracer's bomb scales at 5.5% for some reason. So that's going to start like destroying people in the late game. You still you throw it on a Blaze and he loses 40% of his life from a pulse bomb, and then a Li Ming Q at first was doing 5% of Blaze's life, and then now he's got Mirror Ball, and with the scaling now it's dealing 15%. So all this stuff just starts really compounding up and up and up. But I think a big part about it was they just didn't prioritize like the objective enough. They didn't really, go after it in the right way. But I think that's, if you look at a lot of King's Gambit games, like they really try to fight as much as possible. And that's like a strength of a team if they know that they're good at something in particular and they just keep pushing that aspect, like, oh, really good at macro, so we force macro play, or really good at team fight, we force team fight play. You might not know that you're really good at a certain kind of play, and then when you pick it, you win, and when you pick other stuff, you lose, but you don't like see the difference. And King's Gambit knows what they're good at, and they play it every game. So that's a strength of their team, is that they always play what they're good at. But their macro play is, I wouldn't say it's weak. It's just kind of ineffective. Like I've played scrims against them where they'll be on like an Infernal Shrines, and they'll see they don't get the Punisher, and they'll start pushing other walls, but they don't get enough. They don't time it correctly. It's like they know what they should be doing, they just don't do it super well. And then Battlefield Eternity is a great map for them because there's very little macro play.
It's very much about team fighting on the.
And if you watch that Infernal Shrines game, there was like no way Arya was ever gonna win any team fight. Like it was just not gonna happen. Like pull out a calculator and try and figure that one out, because like they messed up drafts super hard.
Yep. So Dunk, looking forward to the playoffs. After seeing King's Gambit in this cup specifically, do you think that they can contest for a Crucible spot?
Well, I think most importantly, and I'm trying to make sure I have the bracket correct. It's going to be 1 versus 8, 2 versus 7, 3 versus 6, and 4 versus 5. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
Man, EID dodged a bullet then. I'm so happy for them. You guys don't have to fight King's Gambit. If you guys had taken the number, if you'd beaten Arya and then beaten King's Gambit, you would have had to fight King's Gambit in the opener. And I think they look very strong.
That's fine.
And albeit you do basically have to beat everyone to make it through, getting farther in off easier games, getting the momentum, I think is a big deal. Looking at our top 8, We have XD in the first slot, SMV right behind them, Nightcare, yourselves at 4, Laval at 5, Trait at 6, Gambit at 7, and Gazwa at 8. Sorry, I don't even know if I can count anymore. Anyway,
yeah, we play against Gazwa, Rogatois, or we play against Rogue, and we played against Gazwa, then we play against XD.
Yeah, and I feel like that's such a nice side of the bracket. You know, if depending on like how the games go, obviously. So looking at the bracket and my predictions, XD I think goes all the way. I don't see a position where I'm sorry, I don't think they get upset this on their side of the bracket as it stands. I think it's going to be the SMV side that's going to have an upset. I don't know if it's SMV losing to Gambit right off the bat or what, but somewhere in there, I think one of those teams will upset SMV because out of the two teams, the top two teams, I think SMV has looked worse, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. XD, to be fair, did look weaker without Jin. Like, noticeably weaker. Hacho's a really good player.
They're not the same. But yeah, it's not the same
without
roster
Jin,
at all.
Yeah, the synergy's not there yet. They're not the same, and that's why I think that there's a good chance that the 4 or 5 seed can beat them. Whoever ends up winning your match, Battery, I think has a good chance of upsetting them.
Whoever wins that, yeah, who knows?
Yeah.
The thing about losing Jin was that Jin was so complementary to their style.
Mm-hmm.
It'll be hard to find someone who's really who can read, the situation in the same way that Jin was, so that they can, be aggressive and get kills. They really like to be super aggressive, but if they don't have a tank that matches that style, they're drafting comps that like to be aggressive. They like to pop off and get kills underneath, like slow comps. But if they don't have a tank that can, create that space, then their games are just going to look really struggly.
Mm-hmm. Do you think if you make it to the next round, if you beat Rouge, do you think you can take out XD?
Yeah, if it's the same roster, yeah, probably.
Okay.
But,
well, speaking of your team, we're going to transition to talking about you specifically and the team. First, I want to know, obviously, the later part of last year, you were playing with Dark Chimera on Oh My Science. I think after, was it like the first or second open, you decided to split? After the first open, you decided to split. And then you joined up with Nesper. And I want to just know how that team came to be.
Well, I played with OMS for about 4 months. OMS turned into trade value, and then towards the end of it, I just really wasn't enjoying playing on the team. So it was I had this mentality where it's like, well, if it wins, I'll play with anybody. So if it wins, then I'll keep playing. Then it lost pretty quickly, and so I left. Not that it was really anybody's fault but my own. I played pretty terribly, and then after that, me and Dark Chimera was on the team. He was looking for greener pastures too, and we ended up talking with Zanehyde and Xander back then, and we were going to make a team with them, and then we were trying out people, and Nesper was the person we tried out. I actually used to be on a team with Nesper back in 2016 on Elevate, back when we were sponsored back then. I was actually really skeptical of playing with him because I really didn't enjoy the kind of playstyle he had all those years ago, but he actually turned out to be a really different player, so I'm actually really enjoying. I mean, I really like the guy. I just want to win,
Yeah.
It was pretty quick. It was pretty obvious pretty quickly. It was kind of like, oh man, we really like this is the people I want to play with. And then we played 2 opens, and it was like really difficult. Like things weren't making a lot of sense. We decided to actually part ways with Xander, and we picked up Mist. And then right away it was like night and day. Like, okay, here we go. And Mist and Zane Mist had been playing a lot of Hero League, some competitive, and Zane had been playing competitive, but with nobody who really knew what they were doing, or at least could prove they knew what they were doing. It was just a lot of try-hard people who didn't have a lot of experience. So for the last couple of weeks, we've just been kind of hooking up the disconnects with them, and Nesper's been doing shot calling and drafting and bringing it all together. It was a joke. I was trying to figure out what was going to name the team, and the joke was that we were going to do EID, but like an abbreviation of something else. And then it was like, why don't we just name it EID? Just that's it, just EID, and then it can be EID through the open again. And if it gets back into the HGC, then it would be, the greatest meme of all time. So
That'd be pretty good to see.
Playing with them, I actually really like playing with everybody on the team. It's been like a ton of fun. Like I hate to see the losses, but it's always like I feel like all the victories for us have just been kind of one thing, like one step away, one minor alteration, and it would have been glorious. So like we play against HGC teams, we do pretty well in scrims against them. So
it's good.
Like feeling pretty good about it.
Actually, that's an interesting concept here because we had Henning and Lorenz last week from EU, and they talked about how they've had some scrims with like the European teams, but for the most part, they were facing open teams. Do you guys find it particularly easy or difficult to get with those HGC teams and actually get some scrims?
So we could not get HGC scrims until after the 5th Cup. Like we didn't have any HGC scrims until after the 5th Cup. And we finally, mainly because a lot of them were on break, but before they were on break, no one would scrim us because you don't want to scrim against, a team that doesn't have any points in the open. You don't want to waste your time at all in any regard. Like why test number 4 when you could just play against number 1, even if number 1's terrible by, their standards, like why bother? So then when the first week that HGC was warming back up, we got the warm-up blocks is how you get like the good scrims against HGC teams, because HGC players don't get up early to warm up against other HGC teams. Like people don't do that in the HGC. So it's always just like whenever you see those people on, they're just warming. Like that's how it works. Okay. So we warmed up against Team Freedom, and then we warmed up against GFE, and we warmed up against LFM, and like we took a couple games off of Freedom, and we've had some okay games with GFE, and we took a couple games off of LFM, and it was like immediately okay now. And then HGC scrims just start coming in like oh, they could take games off people, like okay, let's get them in here, like it was. And now finally, now schedule's full. It's like finally got it. just had to get foot in the door, and those cups coming in, it's like you play against. Not the Roget Trois that's now, not the King's Gambit that is now, but like you play against those teams between like Cup number 1 and Cup number 6, and like you just you get these 6-0s, these 4-0s in scrims. Like you play fast, you play slow, you play macro, you play cheese. Like everything's winning. You don't get any good scrims, and you have no idea what the right thing to do is. You play against one HEC block. You're like, okay, now I know it's good. Now I know it's bad. I can actually make a plan for what the meta might actually be. Because like most of the time we were discovering the meta in the tournament games, or like what we should be learning, which is not good, by the way.
Yeah. You and I've already found that out.
Pro tip. Yeah. It's like that's like a big thing. Even on OMS, like for the 4 months, it was like, we need to scrim some people that can beat us. Like this is really annoying. Mm-hmm. Like we have no idea what the good stuff is.
Yeah, you guys are just pounding everyone in the amateur series.
And,
so
yeah, and I'm the guy that every game it's like we win really well. My teammate's like, yeah, we're pretty good. And like, what do you mean we're good? They played terribly. Like we didn't do anything. Like
we just played a little bit better.
I'm trying to make sure that we didn't that we're not turning bad information into like this is the right thing to do. We should go like crazy stuff every game. Like we should be doing these weird things. It's like, no, I think Hanzo's pretty meta. Like I think Garage should be first pick. I think Malfurion might be the best healer. Like those are the kind of things that like we weren't sure about like 4 months ago. Where we are now.
Yeah, that's a pretty interesting flip, from our friends over the sea. Because from what we understand, the Singularity guys, at first during in the beginning of the season, even they've been number 1 pretty much since week 1, but. Now they're at the end of the season, they're getting ready for the playoffs and stuff, and they're telling us, oh yeah, well, like we get like we'll get like scheduled for a scrim block, but like if another HGC team is like, hey, scrim us, they like just kind of ditch us last minute. So it doesn't often work out for them. So it's really interesting to know that like here over in the States, you know, HGC teams are being like, oh, you're like the number 4 open team, like you've been doing pretty well, like you took off some scrims in like a warm up scrim, like yeah, dude, let's get you in like a real scrim and like
yeah. Well, like people on my team talk to the HGC guys, they just don't want to waste their time. So like they go like, oh hey, we played against Team Freedom and we went 2-2, and they're like, oh, okay, sure, yeah, we'll schedule a game. But before that, hey, we want to play? Like, I don't really want to play. Like, no thanks. So
yeah.
Well, it's good that you've proven yourself, I guess, to them.
Yeah, it's nice. Wish I had it a little earlier, but.
Well, all right. I gotta move to close out the show. So, thank you so much, Battery, for being on. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks
to
for
have
having
you.
me.
It's always nice to talk to you about Heroes and everything else. So let's do shout outs. Battery, we'll start with you.
All right. Well, shout out to my team. Mist, you can go check him out right after here at twitch.tv/Mist. He's a professional streamer, so follow him. You can follow Nesper stream, but I don't have it memorized for reasons. And this is where I'd shout out my advertiser if I had one. And then Dark Thing, keep up the good work.
Oh, that's great.
Let's move on to you, Dunk.
Yeah,
Nesper,
guys.
be nice.
Make sure you follow below on Twitter. You can also catch me on Twitch. You know, Monday through Wednesday we're streaming. Today's streams are over for the day. We're doing some things this afternoon. Otherwise, like Battery said, follow Mist over at twitch.tv/Mist and follow Nesper at /Nesper.
I just don't have it memorized.
It says PER. It's just how he spells it.
Okay.
Tilted.
I have no way to confirm.
And make sure you check out the HeroesHype website. Check out our store. You know, we got some cool jerseys and fidget spinners. And follow the stream. You know, check out for any amateur series updates. So, Argy, bring it up.
For sure. Make sure it still says Argy. I need to fix that. It's Argy Hots. That's my Twitter and my Twitch. I need to fix that. Like,
oh, you follow me on Twitter. Sorry.
Yeah, follow Battery Hots. That one's actually correct. I made sure that one was correct.
Good.
Make sure you are following in the HeroesHype Discord if you are a player or want to be in tune with the amateur scene. We did announce this morning that the playoffs are going to be on the current live patch. Monday is going to be on the live server, and Tuesday and Wednesday are going to be on the tournament realm. It'll be the same patch for both. So, also, Droplets is the god, not you, Kevin. Sorry. Make sure and go vote for your MVP this week. I think Nesper, Prismat, and Droplets are the 3 contestants for NA. So, all right. Thanks, guys, for coming and letting us talk to you about Heroes and stuff. So we'll see you next, I think Thursday, I think is when we're doing it, because obviously Wednesday is tournament day. So, see you guys later.
Yes, sir.
Bye.
See you next week.